All right. So much different debate than last time. We were excited.
Yes.
Obviously we wanted to be able to speak much longer. And now we have that moment too. So I want to start with you, Latosha, just off the top. What were your just overall thoughts? We can get into specifics in a bit.
No, I'm not so sure. One, I thought Kamala Harris did a great job. I think Pence does what he always does, which is what Vanessa says. He was Pence. That he fundamentally shows that he has no courage. He continues to go through the Trump line, and he avoided questions. And quite frankly, I thought he was very disrespectful to both the moderator and to Kamala Harris, that he did not come intended to engage in a real debate around the issues. And that's very troublesome.
Vanessa?
I don't think anything new was revealed tonight from the Pence-Trump ticket around their strategies. I was pleased with the line of questioning. I'm disappointed that this is not the line of questioning that we actually had for the presidential candidates, and I actually do hope that next week we can see some of that. I thought Kamala actually was presidential. I thought that she laid out a really clear vision for how we can move forward from both the racial reckoning and the public health pandemic that we are having in this country. And I thought she showed poise, and I thought she showed a lot of confidence in Joe Biden in particular. And I'd love to see it.
Wendy?
I think that Kamala had a strong showing. I believe that she was able to get her points across. She was firm, but yet articulate in the same manner. I think that what stuck out to me was the conversation around Breonna Taylor, how, at that moment, it was things that we had assumed that the administration would think, but, Pence said it in no uncertain terms that he believes that justice was served in the case of Breonna Taylor. And I want that to stick out to everybody who is going to be voting. This is not time for us to read between the lines when people are telling you exactly how they feel. And so, I wish that more focus was put on Pence when he did not answer a question. That's really important for them to be held accountable and to answer questions. But overall, it was a strong showing from Kamala Harris.
I'm glad you brought that up, Wendy, because I want us to all talk a little bit more about that. Breonna Taylor. I think I'm still in this space just personally where I am still taken aback when I hear an elected official speak so honestly about race in America. And they were both asked a very direct question, and they both answered, not super directly, but they both gave a yes or no answer to, do you believe justice was served? Pence said yes, which matches his base. A lot of people in this country believe, yes, no one should have been charged for this innocent woman dying in the middle of the night. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, said no. And she spoke directly to Breonna Taylor's family. And she talked about Breonna Taylor and what she was doing and what she wanted to do and what she still could have experienced in this life. What were your thoughts when you saw both of their answers to that question? Was justice served?
That's what this election is going to come down to. Let's be clear. It's going to come down to a couple of fundamental things. We can debate about the economy. We can debate about, the job rate and what is happening across the country. There's debate around if we should wear masks, not wear masks, how the handling of the global pandemic. But whether or not you think Black Lives Matter, whether or not you think that a Black woman asleep in her bed deserves justice for being murdered. There's no gray area there. And it's going to come down to not the dollars and the cents of things, but fundamentally, do you see the humanity of the people who are marching out in the streets and saying, I am a person? And for me, if you are an undecided voter and you're trying to decide around what the job rate is going to be, what the trade is going to be on China, even what's going to happen on the Supreme Court, but you are not talking about what is happening with Breonna Taylor and what Mike Pence just told you about what the Trump administration feels like, there's no gray area there. There's no undecided around that.
That's right. That's right. Literally.
I think that I'm like Vanessa. If you didn't hear anything else with the debate, that one answer tells it all. That fundamentally what we're talking about right now, we're talking about an administration that upholds and supports and advances a white patriarchal racist agenda. And that fundamentally will stand behind it and support it all with the power of the state, right? And so state sanctioned violence. Here is a woman. On one hand, he would actually offer and talk about people, and they'd love to throw up examples, of people where they exploit folks who have gone through pain or someone who's lost a family member, but it's really interesting when it comes to Breonna Taylor, what distinguishes her from her than the others that you all have brought up. What distinguishes her, this is a Black woman in the South that they did not believe, that was killed by the police, that they did not believe that her life mattered enough that to really be able to talk about their agenda, that fundamentally, we didn't hear anything else, that one answer says that this administration is hell-bent on this whole notion of literally not doing anything around the police sanctioned violence that is happening in this country. And a Black woman could be asleep in her bed and nothing can be done to hold those cops accountable that killed her. And he thinks that justice was served. That in itself is enough to say he has to go.
And that's why before we started this debate, when the question was asked about what do you want to hear, that was the question I put out to the group. I wanted to hear about criminal justice reform. I wanted to hear about systemic racism, because I will take it a step further. Yes, I brought up the way in which Pence answered the Breonna Taylor question, but let's take it one step even further. Pence also stated he does not believe that systematic racism exists in this country. He does not believe that police officers have implicit bias. Let's make that very clear. Because if you want to give him a cop-out and say, well, Breonna Taylor, that's one case. Maybe if the fact pattern was different, he would believe that justice was not served there. I don't agree, but let's say that. Mm-hmm. He doubled down on his feelings by saying systematic racism does not exist in this country. Furthermore, all the data that supports that Black and brown people are arrested at higher rates, all the data that supports that you're more likely to be pulled over if you are a Black person, all the data that supports Black people are 5 times more likely to be killed by police officers. Even with that data in hand, he also stated implicit bias in the law enforcement does not exist. There is nothing left to be said. Black Lives Matter is clearly on the ballot come November 3rd. And it's going to come down to whether or not you believe Black Lives Matter. And that is going to be your guiding light when it comes time to vote. Because this administration, the Trump administration, has told you that as long as they reside at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, if you are a Black person, then guess what? Your life does not matter.
Not matter.
And, let's move on to the moderator. Okay. And it seems like something that, no one should even really care about, but everybody cares about it. We were watching and all getting frustrated. I'm checking Twitter. People are frustrated, and it's important because we are going to watch another debate from, a member of an administration that has a policy that we've seen twice now of completely ignoring the person who is supposed to control how the debate flows. And we watched it a lot tonight.
I have to interrupt to say it's beyond even their inability to control and follow the rules. It's actually their inability to check. So we can't, what we saw last week in the presidential debate, and we saw a little bit of that here, is that there are some things that are so egregious that I'm feeling like as a moderator, no, we have to call pause. We have to call pause, and we need a follow-up there. And Mike Pence, there's no follow-up around some of the things that he is saying that as an American people, that we should actually the moderator should underscore fundamentally, did you understand what is happening here? We need the moderator to push back. We need the moderator to excavate. We need the moderator to dig beyond the question here. And in addition to that, we need the moderator to respect Kamala Harris's time. Please.
You're right. And what we saw was one person not following the rules, and it kind of was just like, okay, we're just going to go with that. He's not going to follow the rules, but you have to. And we saw examples where Kamala Harris had to moderate for herself and put her foot down and say, no, because this happened, I need to respond to that. And I don't want to have to see that next time.
No, absolutely. And I was going to say, if you're anyone who knows the rules of arms, as they like to call it, of moderation, there's 2 simple rules. Number 1, if you're moderating, you have a microphone, you never give up your microphone. Rule number 1. Number 2, which is applicable here, you always are compensating where one is lacking. Meaning, if Kamala Harris is speaking and she's interrupted continuously, then you compensate her time. That was never done. She was still given the same amount of time, even if she was continuously interrupted. That is not fair.
Reprimanded and she was reprimanded for it.
And she was reprimanded, and then doubly, she did not reprimand Pence the same way she reprimanded Kamala.
And I think, listen, I also think that we're talking about rules and regulations and all of that. That's fine. But at the end of the day, part of the reason why you have a journalist that is as a moderator is so that they have a certain level that are coming to you or a certain level of a base of knowledge. And some way we've allowed this culture for people to get up and just to lie without being checked or without the fear of being checked as if it's normal. I think that we literally are in a moment, we're talking about people's lives, right? That we're in a moment that the whole point of having a journalist to really be able to frame the question is to stop them, just as in an interview, to really be able to focus them back on the question, to get the answer, right, and don't allow them to literally continue just to recycle lies. And so what we saw is, in my opinion, we saw white male privilege in action. On some level, he used that privilege and was very patronizing, in almost all of his answers. Every single answer he gave over time. He made direct attacks to Kamala. She had to respond to that and almost defend herself, as Black women have to do daily. That Black women that fundamentally space, take our space, take our time, allow other folks to attack us, and then fundamentally we have to defend ourselves. The beauty of that is that Kamala, showing herself and being a Black woman, did not shy away from that. Nor did she depend on this white woman moderator to save her. She stood in her space as much as she could, and she pushed back, which is so indicative of how Black women have to constantly show up in the world. That we saw this man not only take more time, but we saw literally much more deference being given to him than was given to her. And that's
let's go deeper into that. Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, just come on.
I want to go deeper into that feeling, because I think it is something that we've all experienced. Here you have a Black woman listening to a white man try to explain something to her that he's not qualified to.
He's not even qualified. Is that not classic American? That's like,
we've all experienced that.
Like somebody, where's the DJ? I need them to play This Is America right now. Is that just not classic, right? That he is going to mansplain to her, right, about what she did, and he has never been in a courtroom. And I think that the bomb, now I will say the highlight of the night, where I think she dropped the mic and the bomb, is when she talked about, since we want to talk about when she took his words, right, and used them against him.
Talking about history?
The packing, no, he raised around, so do you all intend to pack the courts? And she came back and said, and since we're talking about the packing of courts and how you and the Trump administration have packed the courts and made appointees and not one African-American, I felt like that was a mic drop. That fundamentally,
she was ready for that question.
She was ready for
that. She was ready for that question.
Because they're not answering that question. I don't want to call it a fringe thing, the idea of expanding the Supreme Court, because there are people talking about it, but the entire party, the Democratic Party, is not there. And they have repeatedly both not answered that question. And she was ready for a really strong way to continue not answering that question. And I think people, just looking at how people were responding to it, they were happy with that, because it is important that out of all of the packing of the courts they have done, they haven't found any Black person that's qualified.
Because they don't think Black people are qualified, because they don't think Black lives matter. It's not because Black people are not qualified. It's because the mere fact that your skin is Black, you are already seen as under. We all know the saying that you have to work as a Black person, you have to be twice as good to get half. In the Trump administration, that doesn't even exist. It doesn't matter how great you are. They're not giving you any consideration, because they don't believe that Black people shall occupy that space. That's why I love when Kamala got the opportunity and she said, hold on, I'm the only one here that's been a prosecutor. So don't you tell me about anything that has to do with my line of occupation, because you cannot mansplain that to me. That was a powerful moment, not just for Black women, but for women in general, when you have a man who hasn't even done your job, but he thinks he could tell you about your job. And Kamala said, this is a no-fly zone. You will not do that here tonight.
Absolutely. I do want to say, though, I really push back on this idea that they don't think Black people are qualified. You wouldn't go through so much to prevent Black folks from getting in position. The issue isn't they don't think we're qualified. The issue is in our qualifications it will replace them. That oftentimes in those positions that make it question. So I think that we have to push back on this notion, right? It's almost as if, if you thought that Black folks were so inferior, where's the fear driven from? The fear is really driven from you losing power and you trying to create, you're trying to concentrate.
That's what white privilege is.
White power, but it's not. It's not rooted in that's an excuse. It's not in rooted in the idea that they don't think we're smart enough. It's not rooted in the idea that they don't think we're qualified. What they know and what we've seen even rise into at the seat of being a president, that the space for mediocre white men has been shrinking, that people have been showing up far more prepared, far more educated, far more skilled. And that's where the real fear is. The fear isn't that we're inferior. The fear is in our greatness. And we've got to claim that. We've got to speak to that. We've got to stand in that. And so that's part of the challenge. The challenge is not they don't know how good they are. The challenge is they know exactly how good we are.
That's a great way of looking at it, because you're right. From the beginning of this, back in 1619, the history has shown that it has never really been based on logic. It's just been about their desires. That's the
only way, because the only way you can maintain power is for you to suppress power. Does that make sense? Like if you're not powerful, then you're not a threat to me. People only fear what they think is threatening to them. So their ability to not have us in those seats is their ability to say, you know what? We don't want to let go of this power. So my comment about them feeling that we're not qualified is not necessarily the reasoning, but rather the justification, if that makes sense. They can't say, oh, well, they can't justify it. So the only way they can justify it is by saying, no, they're not qualified. When actually the truth of the matter is probably we're overqualified, because for a Black person to even occupy that space, they've already done twice as much as their white counterparts. Those are the facts.
I want to take this moment too, because again, we've been talking about all night about how you do not see this. And I did have a moment a second ago where I kind of wanted to chuckle, because I was like, wow, this is really fun. Just having the four of us here being able to have, did you feel like that? Like having the four of us here being able to have these discussions, have this platform, have this space to talk about how this affects us. So I want to switch things just for a bit to a bit of a call to action. Just from your opinion, we'll start with you, Vanessa, as far as, this is what we just saw. What do you want to see now? What should we do from your perspective?
I love this whole line of conversation, and I love that you've even come to me to ask this question, because look, there's this sister girl conversation that we have going on where we all hear, and then there's those voters out there, and how are they going to actually vote and show up, right? And for those voters, what happened tonight was most important that Kamala Harris did actually was underscore that actually whatever plan you got ain't working, because 200,000 plus Americans have actually died, and folks are unemployed, and they cannot pay their rent. I thought she did a really effective job at underscoring for those people who are not going to have a deeper debate around race, around bias, etc. I thought she reached them where they were, and that matters to me, because what I want to see going forward is some voter mobilization. So what I want to see going forward is there's this undecided in the middle, but if we just focused on the folks who really are rocking and riding for our ticket, and we focused on voter turnout, and we focus on getting those people to the polls, that's where I actually think it's going, what the difference maker is going to be. So I think that the ticket in terms of Harris and Biden themselves between now and October 15th, they need to hold the Trump-Pence ticket accountable for, are you showing up to that debate in Miami? Are you following the COVID guidelines? Are you do not let them off the hook. So those are the kind of two things that I want to see happen.
Tell us how we can stay connected with Girls Trip.
So everyone can connect every single day. We're actually in the middle of a beautiful campaign called Black History Boot Camp. We walk live noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific. Connect with us at girltrek.org or blackhistorybootcamp.com on all of our social channels. It is the inspiration, the community, and the support that every single person who is in the sound of my voice needs right now. We are hope, we are joy, we are healing. We are 1 million Black women strong. Please join us.
Yes. Wendy, I'll send it over to you now.
I just think as far as next steps, I really want us to continue to galvanize each other, but an emphasis has to be put on that millennial Gen X group. And the reason I say that is because, as a millennial myself, I do know that there's some people within that, demographic who are engaged, but I need that energy to go on through these 27 days. Also, when it comes to the Gen Xers, there's this feeling around social media and how if you tweet it, you've done it. And that's not enough. You can't just tweet it. And, I've spoke to some of, youth that are in that Gen X group, and they say, the voting sounds interesting, but what we really like to do is we like to march. We want to be a part of the protest. They like the action part. But I tell them that there's a time when action has to meet policy. And the way action meets policy is for you to take that feeling you have when it's time for you to march and to take that to the polls. So I need all of us to march to the polls. It's not enough for us to tweet. It's not enough for us to march. We have to now see how all of those feelings we have can fundamentally change the policy. And that's what I want everyone to do in the next 27 days. March to the polls as if your life depends on it, because when I tell you it does, it absolutely does.
Latosha.
So this is my life's work. For the matter of fact, I just came off the road for one day. I'll be home for one day. And we're back on the road. We've been to, in the last 14 days, we've been to 7 states, and we will be going to a total of 16 states by November the 3rd. We are fighting, not because this is bigger than Biden. For us, this is bigger than Biden. This is bigger than what we're talking about, participation. We've got to start talking about voting, about what it's really about. It's not about a participation, it's about power. And fundamentally, right, we've got to talk about in a community, when we're looking at our community, when we're looking where 80% of Black businesses did not get any resources from the stimulus package, and they're projecting that 50% of Black businesses will close. We've got millions of people that are being impacted and living in poverty right now, that we've got folks in debt because they got sick. When we have our community that's disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, we cannot afford to leave any power on the table. And so while voting is not the panacea, it is not the end all and the be all, it will not solve our problem. That when we recognize that we are at war and we are trying to liberate our communities, we have to use every single tool that is available for us, right? Sometimes we just have to use that tool to back people off. Sometimes we have to use that tool to literally be able to create and reduce the harm happening to our community. Sometimes we got to hold people accountable to it. Sometimes we put people in office that align with our agenda. But fundamentally, it is always a tool available for us to use and demonstrate our agency so that we can literally move that much closer to liberating our community. And the vote is not going to liberate us. We're going to liberate us. But in doing that, we've got to use every single tool available to us to really be able to access power. And voting is one of those leverages.
And, I love that you say that, because I think there's a lot of talk and a lot of attention paid to white voters in swing states who swing back and forth between Democrat and Republican, depending on, their personal needs, but not enough attention paid to Black voters who do swing and are likely the most important swing voters and swing back and forth between voting Democrat or not voting at all because of how they feel and how they feel they've been talked to and paid attention to throughout the election process. And it's important for all of us together to not be that swing voter.
That's right. That's right.
There was one thing, and we have to go, we only have like a few minutes left, but one thing I want to talk about, just going back to the debate just a little bit. Both of them were doing that thing that Joe Biden did. A lot of people like looking directly at the camera and speaking to the American people. Yes. And Pence said at one point, stop playing politics with people's lives, as if that has not been the ultimate policy of the Trump administration throughout this pandemic.
That has been the MO of the Trump administration through this pandemic. We have the fact that the president, even now that he has COVID-19, came out and released a statement and said, do not be afraid of COVID-19. It's like the flu. They are literally playing with and gambling with the lives of millions of Americans. This entire administration has looked at people's lives and have not even addressed certain issues that we are all facing. So for Pence to come out here and say, let's not politicize things, that has been the motto, the mantra of the Trump-Pence ticket since day one.
That's right.
Latosha? We've got a minute left, so give me a good 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Listen, y'all, this is about power. We've got to get out to the polls and vote. I need you to vote. All I'm going to say is take 10 and win. So just not yourself. You got to be responsible for 10 people. Take 10 and let's win.
Yes.
Vanessa.
Don't forget your local elections. What is happening at the national race matters, but we have got to show up at our local elections, and from the bottom up, we have got to demand reform.
There you go.
And really quickly, do you feel like this was a strong performance from either side tonight?
I thought it was an extremely strong performance for Harris. I thought it was an extremely strong performance for her showing up on behalf of Joe Biden, especially considering what happened last week, which was a disaster all around. I thought she really came to the Democratic ticket.
Yes, agreed.
Okay.
Natasha?
The same. I thought that she had a really strong performance. I thought that Pence was actually disappointing. To be honest with you, I actually expected more of him. I don't know why, but I expected more of him.